So fundamentally, the plastics in our common synthetic materials like polyester contain BPA, which we know is a huge endocrine disruptive chemical. It can also contain phthalates and PFAS as well. So, these are things that are used for like elasticity, waterproofing, stain resistance. And these hormones, they can leach into your skin. So I would say I'm most concerned about things that you're wearing while you're sweating, because the microplastics can enter your body through your sweat and your sweat glands and hair follicles and any little cuts that you have. The microplastics have been found actually in follicular fluid surrounding each of your oocytes, your eggs in the ovaries. It's a huge problem. If you've been listening to the show, you know I don't believe in one-size-fits-all solutions because your body isn't one-size-fits-all. That's why we created Flow Living, to support your hormones with both targeted supplements and the cycle syncing methodology. It's about giving your body what it needs when it needs it so you can feel more balanced, more energized, and more like yourself throughout the month. If you're ready to try it, you can get 25% off with the code podcast25 at flowliving.com. Hey everybody, welcome to this month's episode for my Ovary Club Insiders. I'm so happy to have you here in my personal group. We're going to answer a lot of your questions today, so thank you for sending them. Keep sending them. I love what you are curious about. Okay, so the first question is a really cool one about wondering how impactful are plastic clothes on our hormones. She said, what about my gym clothes, lingerie, or dresses and fancy outfits that are usually lined with synthetic materials? I love this question because it is unfortunately a big problem. So fundamentally, the plastics in common synthetic materials like polyester contain BPA, which we know is a huge endocrine disruptive chemical. It can also contain phthalates and PFAS as well. So, these are things that are used for like elasticity, waterproofing, stain resistance. And these hormones, they can leach into your skin. So I would say I'm most concerned about things that you're wearing while you're sweating, because the microplastics can enter your body through your sweat and your sweat glands. And hair follicles and any little cuts that you have. So it is like a real thing that the microplastics can get into the bloodstream and be hugely problematic. I'll go into kind of what they do from an ovarian and endocrine system perspective in a minute, but fundamentally they're disrupting your hypothalamic pituitary ovarian conversation. The microplastics have been found actually in follicular fluid surrounding each of your oocytes, your eggs in the ovaries. It's a huge problem. So what does a girl do? Because, I like my workout clothes to fit really nicely and not have like a feeling of looseness, especially when I'm lifting. So you want to find materials like that as much as possible are organic cotton that have a small amount of spandex or things in them, like under 5%, so that you're minimizing the exposure, because it's really impossible to get away from it unless you're wearing like loose fitting, like all cotton kind of workout gear, which you can do. And then, wear them only while you're working out and then take them off. When you wash them in cool water and don't put them in the dryer, because what you're doing by sort of aggressively laundering them and drying them is you're actually stimulating all those microplastics to break down further. And in the dryer, they circulate in the air environment in your home. So I only just wash all my stuff in cold, and then I just hang it on my laundry racks. And that's it, right? So that's sort of the first thing. Then when you are looking at other synthetic fabrics, like waterproofing, really it's the waterproofing issues and that have and things that are like heavily dyed that are going to have more of those phthalates and the PFAS. That's really where we start to get the more serious impact on thyroid health, insulin resistance. It can be much, much more complicated in terms of its impact on your endocrine system. So I really do think that you want to choose the most natural materials that you can. There's a new documentary that was done recently about, are any fabrics totally natural anymore, even wool? I mean, I remember buying wool sweaters from Banana Republic in the 90s that were so itchy. Now, if I buy a wool sweater, it's like completely soft. Why is that? Well, they're coating the fibers in synthetic materials that make the wool much more soft, but also make it perform better. So not all of the improvements in fiber manufacturing are toxic and bad, but it's just important to know, where you can make those choices. So, for example, my workout gear tends to be Mate the Label. I like it. It's I wish they had more colors, but they have like for that. If you want to be sitting in your workout pants for extended periods of time, it's 95 or 98% organic cotton and a tiny bit of spandex for stretch management. But it's great. Other than that, I think you have to be really thoughtful about what products you're buying. I think some of the worst that I've seen are some of the workout gear from like Old Navy. It's like, it just feels like plastic when you put it on. And especially around the breast area, you want to make sure you're wearing cotton sports bras, which I buy on Amazon. I think I buy them they're either Fruit of the Loom or Hanes. I just buy like a 5-pack. They're just these little, very simple cotton sports bras. They just give me some basic control. And then I wear like cotton tank tops underneath. So you don't have to have the whole look, right? When you do your workout, you can have things that are mismatched that on top are just actual cotton clothing. And then on the bottom might be your compromise piece of clothing, right? So do the best that you can. It doesn't have to be perfect. Now, lingerie, listen, there's the lingerie you put on to be cute for 5 minutes. It doesn't matter. You know what I'm saying? Like whatever, it's okay. Yes, there are organic lingerie companies out there and you can Google them. I don't know them off the top of my head. But if you're just wearing them for like a minute, don't worry about it. If it's something you're going to be wearing all day, then absolutely, especially, the panties, but panties and bras, anything that's near these major lymphatic nodes and sweat glands, I would 100% want you to be choosing as organic cotton or at least cotton. And that's really important. I buy organic cotton underwear for my girls. I buy it for myself. I think if you're going to be in it all day sweating, we know that especially the vaginal area is very sensitive and permeable to these chemical exposures. So really important. And of course, any fabric that is fragranced, you do not want to be doing that, obviously, for the phthalates. It's super endocrine disruptive. So that's what I would say. Like anything with chemical exposure, I say this to everyone. I say this to my older daughter who's like sort of growing in her awareness about it. It's do what you can to control your personal environment. Don't become stressed about it. I believe that our bodies have a fundamental ability to be resilient in the face of all of this without having to be hypochondriacal about, oh my God, is my clothing perfect? But I do think we have to find a new line of, okay, there are better options. Let me invest in better choices so that, 80% of the time I can be wearing things on my body that are not endocrine disruptive. And the rest of the time, try not to over stress about it. That's my take. That's how I kind of manage it. Your body works in cycles, not days, so real change shows up over about 3 of them. I mapped it out month by month in a guide called the 90-Day Reset Roadmap, so you know exactly what's normal and what to expect during the shift. I'll drop the link in the show notes. So the next question is someone who's curious about reversing perimenopause. So let me read this question specifically and let's see what she's curious about. Hi, I'm wondering if someone is noticing the very start of perimenopause symptoms, if they can reverse it, especially if they want children. Thank you. Have a lovely day. Oh, so happy that you wrote in. I would say that, there's no reversing perimenopause. Once that train has left the station from an ovarian perspective, that's the train. By the way, we're all on that train. Our ovaries are aging from the beginning. So I would say the clock starts ticking before your first period, right? The ovaries are starting to get activated and they're starting their aging process. So that train is lifelong. So there isn't anything to reverse. This is just a normal part of the ovary's lifespan experience and yours. The thing that you can work on that I've spoken extensively about is slowing down the rate of ovarian aging and hormonal aging. So, a couple of key things that I would have you do is one, I would immediately start having you take ergothioneine. This is brand new research that just came out a few weeks ago at the top of April. Ergothioneine is a derivative of specific functional mushrooms. And what it does is it actually improves our AMH levels. And that AMH level is so important because it speaks to our ovarian reserve. And they've done research, to show that actually supplementing with this ergothioneine is profoundly impactful to ovarian function and can sort of reverse its aging process a bit. So that's a really powerful new tool that I think women over 35 should be considering. Another one is Vitex. Vitex is an herb that's probably been one of the longest studied herbs in the women's materia medica, where you take this herb and it helps you make more progesterone naturally, which I love, and we all need that support. So that's the second one I would do. And then the third, and also one of the longest studied things that we can do, is take melatonin, 3 milligrams of melatonin with selenium and zinc, I would say. Since the mid 90s, researchers have been looking at this combination of melatonin, selenium, and zinc to restart ovulation in women who have stopped ovulating and menstruating. It's extremely powerful. Melatonin is part of the ovary's signaling system to let it know that ovulation is still something that can be done. And as we make less melatonin, then we start to make more FSH, and that suppresses ovulation. So those 3 supplements are really important. Now, if you just take the supplements and you don't change a couple of other things in your lifestyle, it's not going to have the full impact that it could. So if you really are serious about getting your body baby ready, pregnancy ready, then take those supplements. But also, you need to be thinking about what you're doing with your blood sugar on a day-to-day basis. You got to be exercising. So research shows that women who have greater muscle mass from a body composition perspective actually have higher and improved rates of fertility. So, if you haven't started lifting weights, do that. It also supports insulin responsivity. So you become less insulin resistant, which is also really good for your ovaries and their age and ovulation. So those 2 things alone and getting the right amount of sleep. Ovaries have a special sleep window between 10 p.m. and 2 a.m. It's biologically hardwired. You've got to be asleep, having deep sleep during that time for the ovaries to rejuvenate themselves. So get to bed earlier. Wear a sleep tracker for a couple of days just to see if you're getting long stretches of that deep sleep at night. Make sure you're in a cool room, 68 degrees, totally dark, no devices, no blue light, no lights of any kind. And if you're getting good quality deep sleep, long stretches of that, your body's going to make more progesterone, which is super important from a conception perspective. So those are some quick things you can do. Obviously, there's a lot to do. And if you haven't started taking the preconception supplement that I formulated, there's a lot of the things in there that you already want. So there's the melatonin, there's the Vitex, and there's some other special things that really help with that hormonal aging process. So there's a lot to do. I think when there's a will, there's a way. And even if you end up needing to use artificial reproductive technology and IVF, you'll still be more responsive if you take all the steps that I just outlined. So it's a really great question. And even if you want to use these steps not to try to get your body pregnancy ready, but just to slow down your hormonal journey from an aging perspective, this is all the same advice still applies. And this is really what I think is so cool about female biohacking, is that we have to start thinking about it through the lens of how is my ovary doing? Next question is about acne on the chin. She's 36-year-old woman, a mom to 4 little boys. Amazing. And suddenly her chin is breaking out right around her period every month. She's been cycle syncing for a year. She's not as diligent in eating the recommended foods, but she's finding it odd that her skin is suddenly breaking out each month. What would you recommend doing to rebalance my hormones? That's what she's asking. So I don't think that it's odd at all because you're over 35 and your estrogen levels are starting to change and fluctuate. So first and foremost, I really want you to start tracking in the MyFlow app, which remember, that's my app that has the circle icon, not the feather. That's not my app. Track your symptoms. I want to know, are you having any other symptoms that speak to hormonal aging? Because, 35 is definitely one of those ovarian aging cliffs, right? Where we start to have more rapid aging of the ovary. And what we do 35 to 45 is really important in terms of slowing that down and making ourselves healthier long term. So it's a blessing that your chin is breaking out right now because it's an opportunity for you to upgrade your self-care routine, which you have to do anyway because you're 36. You have to start making some significant changes. So I need you to kind of backtrack and be like a little detective. What is going on that your body can no longer tolerate? For example, are you still having like rosé on the weekends with girlfriends? Something simple like that after 35 becomes much more challenging for your body to deal with, right? Because now we have these huge glucose spikes, our liver's compromised, and you're already struggling to deal with your estrogen metabolism. What's going on with your gut? Have you had any issues with being exposed to antibiotics that could have triggered this microbiome disruption that could have created some estrogen imbalance in the body? Do we need to do a little stool test to see what microbes you have going in your gut and how they're functioning? These are really helpful things that you can do. If you want to do a great stool test, the one I love is from Tiny Health. I do that twice a year. I think it is such a powerful gut test. You can do it also for all your 4 little boys as well. They have one for kids. I do to my girls, and I think that's so helpful. So, there is definitely a big connection between gut health and skin health. So that's kind of where I'd want you to focus in and see if there's any habits that need cleaning up. Now, the fact that it's happening right before your period, that could mean a lot of things. Does that mean it's the week before your period? Does that mean it's the day before your period? Because there's 2 different reasons why that would happen, right? If it's the week before your period, that's when estrogen is peaking, and it would be peaking unchecked by enough progesterone because you're over 35, right? So in order for you to have clear skin, you need to have a lot of progesterone to balance out that estrogen, which can cause a lot of activity in the sebaceous glands a week before your period. If it's the day before your period, then we're talking about, are you having some sort of inflammatory response to the drop off in estrogen, which is far less common? So I think we need to just kind of backtrack. What is it? When is it exactly happening? And then what other things are happening in your lifestyle with diet and things that are exacerbating your body's estrogen dominance, which is natural after 35? And then, you could start experimenting with some gentle liver support out after you test your gut. You could add in some things like milk thistle. You could add in some dandelion tea. I drink dandelion tea every single afternoon, just to help my body clear the estrogen from the day. So, you can use some gentle herbal support to help navigate this, but skin is always a deeper thing, and it's not just like what's the one thing that I could do. I would definitely look at how high is your glucose exposure, what's going on with estrogen, progesterone. By the way, you could take a test to see, are you making enough progesterone? You could test on day 21, or you could order a Mira device, which is what we used in the study, and you could do urine hormone metabolite analysis. So see how much hormone is present in your urine every day for one cycle. It'll give you a gorgeous chart of how your hormones are pulsing at 36, right? And the other thing is too, you had 4 boys, God love you. That's a lot of micronutrient depletion, right? And I don't know if you breastfed, I don't know what your deal is, but let's say you had them in rapid succession. Do you also just need to build up your micronutrient stores? Acne thrives in an environment where this ecosystem is micronutrient depleted. So, I've written blog articles about this, how we need extra zinc and B vitamins. So again, these are the types of micronutrient depletion that is often a result of having many children and, trying to diet to get our bodies back, post-baby and all of that. So there's many, many reasons why you might end up with some acne today at 36, but it's definitely a combination of gut, hormones, and diet that is going to create the solution for you beyond just taking some supplements. Okay. Okay, another interesting question about fertility. She's 38 years old, turning 39 soon. At this time, my AMH dropped significantly to zero point 0.8, and a year and a half ago, it was 2.16. Should I be concerned in terms of decreased ovarian reserve? Is IVF worth doing if I only have one ovary, right ovary removed due to an ovarian mass? And with AMH dropped that low, is it expected that my timeline is much shorter than anticipated? I hope I can conceive naturally, but still wanted to know your thoughts. Thanks. Great question. Really interesting case. I love a good puzzle. So first and foremost, one critical piece of information that I wish you had included, and feel free to send it next, anytime so I can, because I want to follow up, is when did you have that ovary removed in the context of testing those AMH levels? Because on the one hand, if you had the ovary removed sometime between that 2.16 reading and your current reading, then one could argue that that new lower reading could certainly be affected by having one less ovary, right? Let's say that it was done long before and that you now have this reading because you're aging and this is a normal part of the process. So either way, right? So in the case where it's just due to age, then, should you be concerned? There's nothing to be concerned about. But if you are concerned from a fertility perspective, then, let's take some action, right? Because if you want to do IVF or not, I would suggest getting a little bit more aggressive with some of the supplements that we know help with AMH levels. So the big new one that I think every woman should be knowing about, and I think, frankly, every IVF clinic should be talking about now and incorporating into their routine practices, is the supplementation with ergothioneine. It just has this profound improving impact on ovarian reserve and AMH levels. So get yourself on some ergothioneine right away. And then there are some other general things that you do which have to do with supporting the ovary as a whole. I would also add in the preconception supplements from Flow Living, because that I formulated for my own journey to make sure that I was able to, get pregnant again at advanced maternal age, right, at 43. So making sure that we're supporting the whole ovarian ecosystem beyond just AMH. AMH is one part, but how responsive your ovaries are is really important. So if you are going to do IVF, at some point you want to be a good responder, and that whole conversation with supplements can be really helpful. Taking some omega-3s, but actually, I really prefer people taking omega-7 sea buckthorn oil. Really, really helpful from a hormonal perspective. So you could take that as well. And then let's see, you had sort of like, you're hoping you can conceive naturally. Of course, if you want to still conceive naturally, the other thing you need to be doing is charting your hormone levels. Like, get that Mira device and start tracking your actual daily hormonal patterns so you can see, do you get a nice progesterone rise in the luteal phase that's sustained? A lot of women don't realize that, that they might be experiencing kind of like falling off the progesterone cliff. So you get like a day or two of a progesterone rise and then you drop and you don't really have an actual proper progesterone dose throughout the luteal phase. You need that sustained progesterone to retain the conception. So you might be conceiving, meaning embryo is implanting into your uterine lining, but without that proper luteal phase length, you won't maintain that conception for the first couple of weeks until the placenta forms in the second trimester. Another thing you can consider doing if you find that you don't have that progesterone level where you want it to be is you could add in some Vitex. Again, that's already in the preconception support. But then when you do know that that you've conceived, you could work with a compounding pharmacy. And I recommend this to a lot of women of advanced maternal age that know that they have a luteal phase insufficiency with progesterone, is you get bioidentical, vaginal progesterone suppositories, right? And this is something that gynecologists and obstetricians would recommend, or even IVF professionals would prescribe to you potentially if they knew that your progesterone levels were low, but they would prescribe the synthetic form. And I don't like all the excipients in the synthetic form, plus it's not a direct match. So you can just go to a compounding pharmacy and get the same dose, bioidentical vaginal progesterone suppository, and you would use those daily for the first trimester to help you retain that pregnancy, so that once the placenta is formed, after week 12, you don't have to take them, you don't have to insert them anymore. So those are the strategies that I would consider. Given your situation, and I'm excited to hear your progress. Okay, we have another question about how to prevent yeast infections and how they're different than UTIs. I mean, like right off the bat, a UTI is very different because there's sort of like this urgency around urination and pain with urination. So that's a totally separate thing, but I'll speak to both. Preventing, and I'll speak to prevention for both, okay? Preventing yeast infections. This one is interesting because first and foremost, you've got to understand what is going on with your vaginal microbiome. Yes, you have one. And like your gut microbiome, making sure that you have the right beneficial bacteria in the right concentrations in the vaginal canal are essential for you to maintain a good defense against these pathogenic bacteria. And that's sort of what ends up happening when you get a yeast infection, is that you have more of the bad and less of the good. So if you're having chronic yeast infections, then to me, that's a signal that you have a vaginal microbiome disturbance. How would that even happen? Well, it turns out it has a direct connection to your gut microbiome. So years ago, in my late teens, when I had all that cystic acne and I was working with a dermatologist who could not figure out what to do with my skin, she finally put me on all these antibiotics to deal with my skin. And I would go on these courses of antibiotics for like 30 days at a time. And yes, unfortunately, they stained my teeth a little bit. So my teeth are a little more yellow than they should be, but there's nothing I can do now. And so, one of the things that did, though, was it destroyed my gut microbiome. Not only was I getting chronic yeast infections, but I would just catch whatever cold was going around, and I would get it to such a horrendous degree. I mean, I would get constantly sick with viruses, right? And it was like, what is going on? And I was a young, healthy person, but my gut was so disrupted that like nothing was working from an immunological perspective. So I would definitely get yourself tested, right? Tiny Health has a gut and vaginal microbiome test. I'm not an ambassador for their company, but I really love their technology. So I would definitely do that. Evvy also, EVVY, they have a great vaginal microbiome testing platform as well. You want to understand what's going on, because the solution is not just better, yeast infection treatments, although I have a couple of recommendations for that. The solution is healing your gut dysbiosis. Okay. So you definitely want to do that and start taking probiotics. You want to eat more prebiotic foods, start sauerkraut, like fermented foods, things like that. And then the other thing is, while you're dealing with yeast infection, like some basic, around hygiene, like wear cotton, don't wear like panties that have that synthetic fiber, keep the area dry, sleep without anything on, like meaning like air it out a little bit at night just to help if you can, and just some basics around that. Okay, so when you're actively dealing with chronic yeast infections, yes, you can get the cream that's sort of anti-itch at the drugstore that you would use like on the labia area. But the best thing to do that I really love is getting a boric acid vaginal suppository. Love Wellness makes them. Vitanica makes them, which you can get on Amazon. So there's a bunch out in the market. And this is just really great because it neutralizes the infection pretty naturally, and you don't need to go get a prescription, and it's less expensive. So those are some of the things that I would do. Really think about the gut and vaginal microbiome, get it tested, see what's going on. And then from a UTI perspective, if that is something that's happening to you chronically, that's also a hormone issue. We know women over 35 who make less and less estrogen actually have an increased rate of UTI infection, because estrogen changes your microbiome diversity in the gut and in the vagina. So, I think it's important to understand that you've got to start taking probiotics. But also, I really love D-mannose for UTI prevention. I use it prophylactically, meaning preventatively. Every time I have sex with my husband, after we're done, I then take a scoop of this D-mannose in a little bit of water and I just slug it back. And just to kind of it's a simple sugar that your body doesn't absorb from a nutritional perspective, so it doesn't cause a rise in blood sugar or anything. And what it does is it prevents any of that bacteria that causes UTIs from adhering to the lining of your bladder, and because they're not forming those little bladder tissue colonies, right? You don't really get the infection, right? So this is something that can be really helpful. I've also recommended this to women who are dealing with moms who are in hospice, who are constantly getting these UTIs as well. This is a really great, totally safe, natural. You can use it all the time. I've been using it for years because I got a UTI from my first C-section. Never had this issue before. And then I had to be catheterized, which was so fun, for that C-section. And I was catheterized for a lot longer than is common because my first delivery was very difficult with the C-section. And so there was just an opportunity, obviously, when you have anything from the outside inserted to you inside, and that's also touching the air and it's not perfectly, kept sanitary, and people are moving the tubes. Anyway, but I got some bacteria, from a urinary tract perspective that was just introduced because of that procedure. And it was something that, on top of having the antibiotics, IV antibiotics for the C-section, it was complicated, but I managed it all with the D-mannose and one dose of antibiotics, and have been working on healing my gut, and it's just no longer a thing. So you have to be smart about UTIs. You don't want them to turn into a kidney infection. So you definitely want to go get a diagnosis with your doctor. But it's, I think, something that we want to just be much more proactive, understanding that we have to care for our parts. And sometimes that means taking a post-sex supplement. I mean, even just interrupting your partner. Sometimes if you feel like you have to urinate during intercourse, don't hold that in. Stop the party, say, bio break, go urinate, and then come back, because and then urinate for sure after intercourse, because all of that helps flush bacteria away naturally and just helps you manage it. So I have lots to say about that. I'm glad you asked that question. It's a good one. We all deal with these issues from time to time, and it's important to know how to feel empowered about what actions to take that you can do at home immediately. So good question. All right, we have another question that I really am excited to answer about creatine. What are my thoughts of taking creatine for women to help with increasing muscle mass, hormone regulation, and dementia prevention? Okay, so let's just start with the muscle mass and the dementia prevention first. It's a little bit easier. So there's lots of research. Obviously, creatine is really helpful in terms of protecting muscle mass. I take it. I take 5 grams a day, so pretty straightforward. And no, it doesn't affect me in terms of water retention, but everybody's different. It absolutely helps deal with sort of sarcopenia, which is this age-related muscle loss. So really an important thing. I wish I had started taking it sooner, but the research came out when it did. And, that's what's so cool about being in women's health, is it's always evolving. And so as we know more and learn and understand better, we can adjust our self-care plans, which is really great. There's a lot of research about how it improves cognitive performance. It can assist when there's sleep deprivation at higher doses. So, 5 grams is the typical dose, but a lot of biohackers in the female space are taking bigger doses to help with the cognitive aspect of it. So, there's places for you to dig in with that. But I definitely wanted to just zero in a little bit on the hormone piece. So creatine doesn't directly affect hormone levels, but what's interesting is that estrogen and progesterone affect creatine creation in the body. So if your estrogen is low and your progesterone is low, then your ability to make creatine is lessened, right? And then that's a challenge because energy availability for the muscles and for your brain are will be impacted. And so supplementation is so like logical here, right? So that's, you could just take it for the luteal phase if you didn't feel like taking it every day during your cycling years when you're under 35. But after 35, there's no reason not to take it every day because estrogen is starting to decline and progesterone is starting to decline. And this is why we have that sarcopenia, that muscle wasting that happens as we age, because of this relationship between your sex hormone decreasing and your ability to make creatine. So I definitely think that it's wonderful. There's also research emerging about how it's helpful during pregnancy and postpartum. Uh, I, I think it's a really good supplement. I love taking it. There's no negative impact. So for sure, add it to the stack. Add it to your female biohacking stack. I think it's a good thing. Last question of the day. This is from a study participant. So I'm going to read her question. Hi, would love to hear from you about how our cycles affect ADHD. I'm a study participant, yay, who was recently diagnosed with ADHD, and I've been noticing that my ADHD symptoms are significantly worse during my luteal phase. Not surprised, I'll explain why. I suspect it has to do with my hormones dropping, but would love to hear your opinion on it. Thank you so much. The study changed my life. It's been so cool to see the ripple effect so far. Thank you for donating your PMS to science, my friend. And I'm so happy to have you in the Ovary Club Insiders. That is so great to have you here. Let me get right into your question. So absolutely, ADHD is going to be, the symptoms of that are going to be exacerbated in the luteal phase because of the drop in estrogen and progesterone. But estrogen specifically helps regulate dopamine. And dopamine, helps with mood and concentration. So that's kind of really going to be making your ADHD symptoms feel worse. So what can we do? Now, the research shows that if you take anywhere from 300 to 500 milligrams of magnesium a day during the luteal phase with 1,000 to 1,200 milligrams of calcium, that can help with neurotransmitter regulation during the luteal phase, right? The other thing is making sure that your progesterone levels are where they should be, right? And your estrogen is not just unchecked. Then there's also the ability to use GABA and L-theanine. So GABA reduces neuronal activity in the brain. It calms the mind. So with women who have ADHD, that kind of morphs into PMDD, which is a thing. GABA can be really, really helpful because GABA can reduce that anxiety. L-theanine is a little different. And I would only take the GABA at night because it can make you a little sleepy. L-theanine can manage that anxiety if you're feeling that during the day without any of that drowsiness. So there's a couple of different tools that you can use. But since I know you did the study, I won't go into all the other like dietary and lifestyle things that I know you're already doing. But keep those up and just really check in, maybe do a little just dipstick on what are your progesterone and estrogen levels on day 21. You could do a blood draw. You could go back to your Mira device and see how you're doing. But yes, ADHD in the luteal phase is a real thing. It's not in your head, and using some supplements can really help. Okay, that's it for the Ovary Club Insiders Q&A for this month. Keep your questions coming. I'm eager to see what you're curious about and what you want to learn about. And as always, thanks for subscribing.